Why the hell is it so damn hot in here?
I have the heat on. It's for immersion.
It's 90 degrees outside.
We're starting our DARKSUN campaign tonight.
Fill your water skins, players. It's your moment in the DARKSUN with 5 things you must have in your DARKSUN campaign. This week on the Dungeon Masters Dojo.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dungeon Masters Dojo podcast. This is a show for game masters and players alike. We hope to bring you tips and tricks to elevate your game and develop the art of dungeon mastery. I'm your host, Louis Aponte, and these are your Dungeon Masters, Scott Labby and Bill Robotile. Let's enter the dojo and see what they have in store for us today.
It's fucking hot in here. Why's the heat on?
We're doing DARKSUN, man. Got to have that immersion.
I have sweat in places I don't want to have sweat.
He's glistening.
I'm going to wear a loincloth tonight when I run.
Please.
It's going to be
No.
awesome. Awesome.
I burned all the Speedos, so.
Sorry, Tarzan wore one.
Yeah.
DARKSUN.
DARKSUN.
One of my favorite campaign settings for D&D. One of my top favorite campaign settings for D&D. When DARKSUN's done right, it's a great departure from high fantasy and fable that you may be used to. When it's done poorly, man, it really shows. So if you're going to adventure in the DARKSUN campaign setting, you better do it right.
But before we get into it, let's talk about some ways you can support the DMD.
You can support the Dungeon Masters Dojo in some very simple ways. Be patronizing, like Lou, and become a patron on Patreon and unlock exclusive patron content.
Or if you're like Scott and long-term commitment is an issue, you can buy a Sasaki, shop our merch page for DMD swag, or use our Drive-Thru RPG affiliate link next time you shop Drive-Thru RPG.
Or visit us on the web at thedungeonmastersdojo.com. There, you'll find links to all the above. Don't forget to email us and say hello.
Thanks for listening. So let's get into it. Get rid of all the extra races we now have in 5e.
We've got a lot.
Yeah, there's a plethora.
Yeah, which is great for other campaign settings, but it doesn't really work for DARKSUN, in my opinion, right? So stick with the Aarakocra, dwarves, elves, half-giants, halflings, humans, Thrycreen, and there were half-dwarves, too. I don't know.
They were called mauls.
Mules.
Yeah.
Mules.
Mauls.
Yeah. I was the mule.
It's M-U-L-S, so that's why I just said maul.
Yeah.
All the others, unnecessary.
Nope.
No need.
Right? And you may ask why, right? Harangon, they're going to be eaten right out of the get-go. They're giant rabbits, right? When food is sparse, you know?
Yeah, everything's going to be hunting
It's
them
like,
down.
look at, they taste just like chicken.
How about the worst class to play? A Triton. Or
Yeah.
a Grung.
Yeah.
Well, there's these shriveled up husks in the middle. Well, you made a mistake of getting off the Spelljammer ship, didn't you?
Yeah, they'll be all crusty like earthworms on the sidewalk, you know,
In
when the sun
minutes.
comes. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of, like, when the world starts to crumble, you should expect a lot of warfare and violence and stuff. So some species are they're going to become extinct.
I was about to say, go extinct.
Yep.
So stick with those and really, really know them, because they're very different in DARKSUN than they are in like Faerun. Like halflings will eat you.
Yep.
Yeah.
They live in the jungle and they'll tranquilize you, and you'll find yourself over a spit like Han Solo in the Ewok camp, you know. And you know what they're like Ewoks. They may be cute, but they're going to eat you. And everybody seems to overlook that. It's like, yeah, the Ewoks were cute, but those little fuckers, they were going to eat Han Solo.
Yeah, and any race that files their teeth in the points should be a warning.
Yeah, look out. Not that the halflings did that, but I don't know. You know, my halflings in my DARKSUN campaign certainly would have filed teeth.
Mine did.
They're not Bilbo Baggins.
No.
See, my halflings would have bone-crunching teeth.
Nummy.
It's a dying world with races struggling to survive. So there's going to be a lot of it's not for the faint of heart.
No, this is a survival game
Yeah.
at its max.
In
Yeah.
today's day and age, and that's not to detract from, the way people think today, but back then, we saw it as another like kind of Mad Max setting, but really there's going to be a lot of stuff in a Dark Sun campaign that people may find disagreeable, so maybe it's not even worth playing for your table if it's one of those things, because I really think you have to embrace it in its entirety as it was presented for you to get the depth of that campaign setting.
And that statement pretty much brings up our next point is this is a post-apocalyptic setting. There should be a heavy survival element to your Dark Sun campaign.
Yeah, pretty much everything will kill you, including the environment. And
The environment, first and foremost.
everything is actively trying to kill you. There's never a respite.
Nope, I mean, this was one of my favorite campaign settings.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably my second favorite. And it was brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, you had charged for how much water you had to intake. You couldn't, there's no metal armor. There's really no metal weapons at all.
Yeah, it's bone or stone or...
If you had metal, you were probably going to be taken out because somebody else wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
It was that valuable. It was more valuable than gold.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. You wanted a metal weapon because they're good, but you didn't because it put a target on your back.
Yep. And you didn't want metal armor at all.
No.
Because you'd cook.
Yep.
It'd be like being in a microwave often.
Sitting right in an oven.
Bing. All done.
Yeah. So resource management is big, and that means that as a DM you have to constantly check in with your players. You have to manage your resources because, as you said, the environment's probably your biggest adversary.
I think this is probably the only, well, there may be one other one, but this is the only D&D setting that I've really played in that you had to manage resources.
Yep.
Even, not just even resources, just traveling, because you didn't want to travel during the dead of day, or else you'd be dead during the day.
Yeah, I saw it as very like Mad Max, like the Mad Max movies from like the 70s and the 80s, where it was just this like wasteland, like the Australian outback post-nuclear war.
Yep.
Where just the people in general like looked different. Everybody looked hungry because they were. Everybody looked thirsty because they were. There was really no health care. There was a lot of missing teeth. There were a lot of like deformities and stuff like that. It was a harsh environment. You were lucky to survive an attack by something.
Another good movie to watch is The Book of Eli.
I was going to mention that. It was one of my favorite books.
Yeah, it's they did a very, very good job of depicting a post-apocalyptic world with resources right at the brink.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies too. That was that's a good one. And it doesn't, there's not a lot of post-apocalyptic fantasies out there. So stick with your post-apocalyptic movies, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what Dark Sun should be run like.
And our next point is goes hand in hand with our previous point, but morals are different in Dark Sun campaign settings. Let's just say that they're kind of flexible.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do to survive.
Survival of the fittest.
Yep, and that may mean that your PCs become bandits.
Yeah, that's possible.
They may have to take resources from other groups. They may have to.
Oh, I remember doing that, because if we ran out of water, or which usually was the case, we had to try to get water from elsewhere. And since there's no wells everywhere,
right?
If we saw a caravan with their water containers, we tried to take it because we needed it.
We didn't necessarily have to be a bandit, but you definitely had to be opportunistic.
Yes.
If there was an opportunity there, you took it no matter what. Unless it was going to take your life. And even then, it was a check and balance kind of thing there. It's like, all right, I think I can afford a couple wounds, maybe a loss of a finger, maybe a hand, but I'll still be alive.
The chances of you getting what you needed outweighed
the dangers.
The dangers, yes.
Yeah. And having that mindset around the table is important. It's like, well, I've known players who were very protective. The last thing they wanted to do is die in a setting like Dark Sun.
Let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor.
You're a new DM who wants to jump behind the screen. Maybe you've been volunteered by your gaming group, but aren't quite ready. You've been watching people play games online or on podcasts, and you're thinking to yourself, where do they come up with all that descriptive narrative? There's no way I can do that. Well, don't worry. We've got a solution for you. What if I were to tell you that I can put a team of professional writers alongside you at your desk while you're prepping your game. Sounds pretty good, huh? With Describe, we can do just that. These narratives vividly describe monsters, places, spells, people, you name it. It's there, and there are more than 6,000 of these easy-to-search up, copy, and pastable, beautifully written narratives right at your fingertips. Confidently read these narratives aloud in your campaign and impress noob and veteran gamer alike. And the best thing about it is, the library of narratives is constantly growing, and it's affordable. Describe has graciously provided us with a discount for our listeners. Head on over to describe.com/DMD. That's DSCRYB.com/DMD. Use the code DMD at checkout to try Describe for 2 weeks for free. Links will be in the show notes.
And now, back to the show.
Dying isn't that bad. It's like it just means you're no longer living this terrible, awful, horrible life in this terrible, awful, horrible place. So what's the worst that could happen? I could end up with water, or I could end up dead. If I end up with water, then I'll probably survive another day. If I end up dead, I won't have to worry about it. I'm finally, relieved of this terrible place. It's that weighty and that heavy an environment.
And I remember playing with I think it was DJ Paul, maybe Robert, and a couple other guys, where we actually had to weigh all these things. So if we got items, we didn't hold on to them. We shared them out because that meant survival for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And that person's survival may save your life.
That's where our thought process was.
Yep.
Yeah, the selfishness
Not in
was
this game.
different. Yeah. It was very different. You wanted the people in your group to be well equipped because that gave you that extra.
Yeah, there
that
was
extra
no
shot.
hoarding of magic. If there was, guys did it very well, but they were sharing everything because my skills helped them survive and vice versa.
Right. What if you're the healer? You're holding out on water because, no, it's my water. Okay. You're wounded. Sorry, this is my healing. Bleed.
That brings us to our next point, Bill's favorite. There has to be psionics. It replaces much of the magic that was lost.
Yeah, and in DARKSUN, there's not a lot of magic left. Magic is what caused this apocalypse. And there's sorcerer kings.
They hoard the magic.
They hoard the magic. So psionics replaced the magic. And because of that, you have to have psionics in DARKSUN. It's part of the world.
At least some form of psionic, because not everybody was full psionic.
Right.
You had to roll on a chart,
Mm-hmm.
and either if you got the right numbers, you got to be what they call the psionicist. If not, you just got, if you were lucky, 1 or 2 powers.
Yes.
And I believe if some of them still had prereqs, so if you didn't have the prereqs,
You didn't get it.
you didn't get it.
And you got 1 or 2 sciences out of 1 devotion.
Yep.
And that was it. This is probably the only place that I actually had no problem with psionics because there was no magic. And everyone had it, or at least a little bit. So more often than not, most people had at least some defenses against psionics because psionics was so prevalent.
Right.
Where everyone had a little bit of iron will or,
Defensive mind,
defective mind, intellect fortress. There was a few out there that they had enough where they could stave off. It wasn't, my biggest hang up with psionics is there's no saves and there's no way to stop the effects. And that, I thought that unbalanced the game. Where in this game, everyone had a shot or at least had a little bit of ability to hold their own against a true psionicist, at least for a little while if you gang up even better, but you weren't defenseless against it. So in this setting, I really didn't have a problem with psionics.
It was more balanced.
Right. And that's always been my biggest hang up about psionics is it unbalanced the game in the way it was originally presented. In DARKSUN, it was not presented in that form. It was a little bit more balanced. So I didn't have any problem
No, it was
with
the
there.
new form of magic for that world.
Exactly.
It speaks to the point of your survival of the fittest, right? The people with psionic ability did better. They were able to pass on their genes. And before too long, you had a world of psionic ability. And that when you remove that psionic element from DARKSUN, you take a huge chunk of what the setting is with it, and it's a shame.
Well, and you're absolutely right because there is very, very, very little, if any, especially at lower levels. You're not going to find magic. You're not. High levels, maybe you got a shot of running across something. And then as soon as you do, it's probably going to be taken away from you. Or at least you're going to be sought after to take it away from you.
Well, you're a very high target at that point.
Yes. But, so you have to have something there to fill the void. And I think PSIONICS does actually a pretty good job in this particular genre.
Our next point is DARKSUN. It had slavery and disparity. We got to face it. It was not a happy place.
It wasn't.
Not at all.
And it was like something of a caste society.
Yes.
Where you had to have and have-nots. And have-nots had nothing.
Yep.
And if you wanted something, you worked for somebody else, or you were made to work for somebody else. So yeah, and that slavery thing is a trigger for a lot of people and a lot of things. But in the world it was written in, it is a part of it. That's all there is to it.
It's not a kind place.
It's not a kind place. It was a form of survival. It's like, okay, I could accept my fate, or I could be cast off, and that's a sentence of death.
For people who are indentured, I'll call it, it was a way of survival for them as well.
Yeah, it's food.
Yeah, it's
right.
water.
It's food, it's shelter, it's water. It sucks, but I'm not, this is people in this setting, they did and do what they have to do to make it through the day, to survive. And unfortunately, I mean, again, it's a post-apocalyptic setting. You think about how horrible we would be to one another if we weren't all fat and happy, and we didn't have, Amazon or, drive-throughs and stuff like that.
Or a tap in the sink to
right.
give you an unlimited supply of water.
If the world crumbled, we would descend very swiftly into barbarism.
Mm-hmm.
And DARKSUN is a reflection of that. So as terrible as things like slavery and people being cruel to one another are, it's an integral part of what makes DARKSUN the campaign setting it is. And if it's not your thing, it's too triggering for you or like people at your table, this is probably the campaign setting to stay away from.
I would say yes. You're right. Yeah.
It's certainly not a slight against those folks that are not comfortable with this. It's just, you stay away from the stuff that really just doesn't fit you, or you find upsetting.
This really has to be talked about in session 0, because DARKSUN. Oh, we're going to play DARKSUN. Unless you really either have played it before or have it now and ready to play it, you don't know what it's really like. So this is one book you really need to read over and talk about it with your table. Your table has to be in full agreement.
Yeah, you don't want to spring this on anybody. I mean, if we were talking about dark fantasy in previous episodes, and we said, some people have triggers especially when you get into dark, with clowns, with arachnophobia, claustrophobia, zombies, things like that. For the same reason you talk to them about you're dealing with undead and are you uncomfortable with this, you have to talk to them about the ramifications of a post-apocalyptic world where people are using other people as resources. And are you uncomfortable with that? That'll hopefully clarify stuff. And if someone isn't comfortable with it, or the majority, all right, well, we'll play another setting.
Yeah, and you have DMs. You should be respectful of that, and other players as well. If someone at your gaming table just isn't okay with that, be mindful of that. This may be upsetting to them, and be respectful of that, right? Mm-hmm. Because you would expect the same thing from them if situations were reversed.
Yep.
And just to go a little further, if you are really interested in playing this game, there are a couple of 5e conversions out there that do exclude this a little bit. They don't exclude it totally because it is part of the world, but they don't make it a focal point.
Yeah, it's pared back considerably.
Yeah.
So it's in the background.
So they're a little safer. What I'll do is I have some links. I'll post some links where you can go download these if you so choose. And they are from reputable sites. And you can I believe even the DM's Guild has a 5e conversion from 2 to 5. So it makes it easier for you to play.
And if you want to explore this and you want to do your best to tastefully approach some of these like triggering topics, we have done episodes on like hot topics that are still alive and well in our own games, and how you can approach them in a tasteful fashion so as not to, offend or be triggering to any of the people playing at your table. So have a listen at those. That could give you an idea of how to approach this, particularly if someone has said, I'm not really comfortable with a lot of these topics. You can, if you're still very adamant about playing, pare it down. We have some tips on how to do that.
And that's 5 things you must have in your DARKSUN campaign. We'll see you next time in the dojo. That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo, or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.